The scale ticket printer coughed twice behind the glass, then pushed out a narrow white strip with my corn weight on it and somebody else's name, where mine should have been. I leaned closer before the clerk tore it off. The top line said Rowan Family Acres LLC. I had hauled corn to that co-op for 38 harvests. I knew their wet grain smell, their probe, their too-hot scale house heater. I had seen my name printed on more tickets than I could count. Elias Rowan. Sometimes Elias G. Rowan, if the system felt formal. Never that. The clerk, a young man named Tyler, looked from the ticket to me and gave the nervous half-smile. People give when a machine says something neither of you asked it to say. "Mr. Rowan, did you set up a new farm account this year?" "No," I said. He turned the ticket so I could read it from my side of the counter. Gross weight, tare weight, net bushels, moisture dockage. All ordinary, all familiar. Then under payee that new name sat there like it owned the crop in my truck. Rowan Family Acres LLC, I said slowly. I never formed that. Tyler tapped the keyboard and his smile disappeared. It is showing as the settlement account for this delivery. Settlement means the check. He swallowed. Yes, sir. Unless the manager puts a hold on it, the crop proceeds would be assigned through that account. That was the first time I felt the floor of the scale house shift under me. Not because I did not understand computers. I understood exactly enough. I had planted that field, paid for the seed, watched the rain come late, and the wind flatten the north end in July. The first printed record of that work said the money was pointed, somewhere I had not approved. Behind me, my semi idled on the outbound scale. A second truck waited near the probe lane. Farmers do not like drama at the elevator. We like weights tickets, coffee, and getting back to the field. So I kept my voice low. Tyler, print me a copy of that ticket. I can do that. And don't settle this load. He looked toward the inside office door. I need Bev for that. Bev Carver had managed that place long enough to know when a man was angry and trying hard not to be. She came out with a pencil clipped in her hair and the calm face of somebody who had seen plenty of harvest trouble. Elias, she said, what are we looking at? I slid the ticket across the counter. A payee I did not create on corn, I raised, tied to money, I did not assign. She read it once, then again. She did not gasp. She did not accuse anybody. That was why I believed her process. I'm going to put a temporary hold on this delivery before settlement, she said. That does not decide ownership. It stops the check from moving while we review the account setup. Make good, I said. Because if that ticket is right, someone tried to get between me and my own harvest. Bev nodded toward her office. Come in. We need to see who had authority to route your corn check to this LLC. I folded the ticket once and held it in my palm like it might burn through the paper. I did not know whether it was a mistake, a shortcut, or something my own blood had talked themselves into calling help. I only knew one thing for certain. The first load of my harvest had printed my warning in black ink. Bev shut the office door firm enough to separate us from the scale house noise. Through the little window, I could still see Tyler moving around the counter. Outside, my truck sat with its first load, weighed unloaded, and caught in a place no farmer wants his crop to be delivered recorded, but not honestly payable. Bev sat at her computer and said, I'm placing the hold first. Then we talk. I appreciated the order of that. Talk is cheap when money is already leaving. She opened the delivery record, the account screen, and a settlement tab. My name appeared in one box. The LLC appeared in another. There, she said. Temporary hold entered. No settlement check will issue from this load until this account conflict is reviewed. I let out a breath I had not known I was holding. Now tell me what the system thinks happened, I said. Bev turned the monitor a few inches. She was not there to take my side by emotion. She was there to stop the co-op from paying the wrong party, and that was enough for me. This new farm account was added before harvest, she said. It lists Rowan Family Acres LLC as the settlement payee. Attached to it is a crop proceeds assignment, meaning the system has instructions saying proceeds from crop deliveries under that account are assigned to the LLC arrangement. I never gave those instructions. I'm not saying you did. Bev clicked again. There is also a lease document uploaded to support the account setup. That word made my jaw tighten. A lease can be proper when everyone signs the same understanding. But tied to a payee I had never authorized, it sounded like a bridge built over my head. Uploaded by who? I asked. Bev paused. The file history shows an email contact. Nolan Rowan. For a second, the office heater got louder than it had any right to be. Nolan was my son, my youngest. The boy who used to ride the buddy seat and fall asleep before we finished the back 40. A grown man now with a hauling business and a fast mouth when things were not going his way. Nolan uploaded a lease, I asked. That is what the record shows. An upload record is not the same as me accusing him of anything. It tells us where the packet came from, and the packet points my corn check away from me. At the moment, yes. That is why the hold matters. She printed the account note. Not the whole packet, yet just the summary lease uploaded proceeds, assigned lender notice attached. The last phrase changed the room. Somebody outside the family believed there was a claim against the harvest money. I read the note twice. My hands were steady because the shock had sharpened into work. If your corn money is routed through a name you never created, you start with the first record and do not skip steps. Print me what you can give me today, I said. I can print the ticket, the hold note, and the account summary. For the full packet, I need to follow our review process. Do it clean, I said. I don't want gossip. I want paper. Bev nodded. That is the only way this gets sorted. My phone buzzed while the printer warmed up. Nolan's name lit the screen, then disappeared. A second later, Marcy called. She never called twice during harvest, unless somebody told her to. I looked at Bev and she looked at the phone. Answer it later if you need to, she said. No, I said, watching Marcy's name ring again. If my children know about this account, I want to hear which story they agreed on before they know I have the hold note. Marcy and Nolan arrived at the co-op in the same pickup, which told me more than either one of them said at first. Marcy stepped out, holding her purse with both hands, shoulders pulled high inside a tan coat. Nolan came around from the driver's side with his cap low and his phone in his palm. They did not storm in. A stranger would have thought two concerned adult children had come to help their father fix a clerical problem. That was what made it hurt. I met them outside Bev's office. Tyler had enough to do without hearing Rowan family business. Bev stayed inside with the door open close enough to witness far enough to let us speak first. Dead Marcy said Nolan told me there was confusion at the scale. The ticket printed a payee I never authorized. Nolan lifted one hand. It is not what it looks like. I almost laughed, but there was no humor in me. Then start with what it is. He glanced at Marcy. She answered first, softer than him, the way they always did when they needed me calm before I knew why. We were trying to modernize the farm books, she said. Everything has been scattered between your account, Mom's old farm account, co-op record seed bills. Nolan said a family farm structure would make harvest settlement and operating bills easier. A family farm structure, I repeated. The LLC, Nolan said quickly. Rowan Family Acres. It sounds official because it had to. Co-ops and lenders like clean paperwork. I do too, I said. That is why I read what prints on my scale ticket. Marcy looked toward the office. Dad, nobody was trying to take anything. Then why did the first load of my corn print under an account I did not create? Nolan tucked his phone into his jacket. Because we were trying to get ahead of cash flow before harvest got messy. Fuel drying, fertilizer repairs. Everything hits at once. I know what my bills are. You know the farm bills, he said. You don't always know how the paperwork side looks to other people. That sentence landed wrong, and he knew it. Marcy closed her eyes for half a second. I kept my voice even. Other people can ask me. We did not want to worry you, Marcy said. There it was, the oldest varnish in family life. We did it so you would not worry. As if worry is worse than being bypassed. As if a father who has carried weather debt repairs grief and harvest nights needs protection from a conversation about his own crop. I took the folded scale ticket from my shirt pocket and opened it. This is not worry, I said. This is instructions to send crop money somewhere else. Nolan's jaw worked. It was temporary. Temporary still requires permission. You gave it, Marcy said. I looked at her, then really looked. She was pale, but not surprised by her own words. Scared of them, maybe. Not surprised. Say that again. She swallowed. The crop share lease. Nolan said you signed it, so the LLC could handle settlement this season and then reconcile everything after the bills cleared. For a moment, I remembered the way my late wife went quiet when one of the children tried to talk around the truth. That quiet kept me from raising my voice now. Mercy. I said, "I have not signed a crop share lease with Rowan Family Acres LLC." Nolan looked away toward the grain bins. I turned toward Bev's office. "Then we need the uploaded packet." Marcy reached for my sleeve. "Dad, please don't make this ugly." I pulled my arm back gently. Ugly started when somebody made a document say yes for me. Bev did not hand us the uploaded packet right away. She called it up on her screen, first checked the file stamp, checked the account note, then told Tyler to keep the counter moving while she printed a review copy. That mattered to me. She was not treating the packet like family gossip. She treated it like a document that could move money, and therefore a document that needed a trail. Marcy stood beside the chair with her arms folded. Nolan stayed near the window, watching trucks roll over the scale, as if he could climb into one and leave with them. I sat because my knees had started to feel hollow, and I did not want either child mistaking that for weakness. The printer started up in the corner. First page cover sheet, second page account setup. Third page, the words that made the room smaller crop share lease. Bev laid the pages on the desk in order. "This is the packet uploaded with the LLC account," she said. "Again, I am not deciding whether it is valid. I am showing you what the co-op received." "That is all I am asking for," I said. I read slowly. I have never been a fast paper reader. My wife used to tease me for mouthing lines when bills came in, but that habit saved me from plenty. I read the field description. I read the crop year. I read the settlement language that said deliveries tied to the listed acreage could be paid through Rowan Family Acres LLC. Then I reached the signature page. There was my name, not printed, signed. Elias G. Rowan tilted slightly upward at the end, the old hard loop on the R. A man can recognize his own hand, even when his heart does not want to. For half a breath, I understood how Marcy had believed it. The signature looked real because the signature was real, but the page was not. I touched the copy with one finger. This came from my conservation compliance form. Marcy looked at me. "What?" "3 springs ago," I said. "Same slant, same broken ink line through the G. I signed a farm program update after a rain delay." The pen skipped. Nolan turned from the window. "Dad's signatures look alike. That is what signatures do. Ink skips do not land in the same place by coincidence." Bev leaned closer, but did not touch the paper. "You are saying this signature image may have been copied from a different form. I am saying I never saw this lease language. I never signed a lease giving an LLC settlement rights to my crop." Marcy's face changed then. Not all the way. Not enough. But the story she had brought with her had taken its first hard dent. "Nolan said you had already agreed," she whispered. "Nolan said a lot." Nolan's voice tightened. "We were trying to keep things moving." "Paper can move faster than truth," I said. "That is why people use it when they want truth to catch up too late." Bev gathered the packet back into order and clipped it. "The hold stays. I will mark that the signature is disputed and that Elias denies approving the lease language." "Good," I said. But the relief did not last. Because if I could see an old signature scan sitting on a new crop share lease, the next question was worse than the first. If this lease could not stand on its own, why had a lender accepted it far enough to attach a notice to my harvest? Bev pulled the last page from the packet and set it apart from the lease. It carried a letterhead I knew by sight even before I read the name, Prairie State Ag Credit. Farmers learn the look of lender paper the way sailors learn clouds. Some letters are ordinary. Some mean a payment posted. Some mean a rate changed. Some mean somebody somewhere believes your crop has already been promised. This one was a lien notice against harvest proceeds under Rowan Family Acres LLC. I read the first paragraph twice, not because the words were fancy, but because I wanted them to become less clear. They did not. Prairie State Ag Credit had received documentation showing crop proceeds assigned through the LLC account. The co-op was being notified that settlement funds tied to those deliveries should be handled according to that assignment until released or corrected. "So my corn could pay that note," I said. Bev answered carefully. "If the account were not on hold, settlement would follow the instructions in the system. The lien notice tells us another party has a claimed interest in those proceeds." "Another party," I said, looking at Nolan. "For a debt I did not take." Nolan stepped forward. "It is not your debt." But it is my corn. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. It was supposed to bridge a gap. That is all. Marcy turned to him. What gap? He ignored her. Prairie State needed clean collateral language. The LLC made it easier. Everybody does it clean now. Separate entity, separate books, clear settlement. Everybody who owns the crop can make those choices, I said. The person who planted it, the person who paid for the inputs, the person whose name belongs on the settlement check. Bev slid the paper back toward herself. Elias, this is ordinary collateral paperwork in form. That is why it moved through the system. The problem is whether the assignment underneath it was authorized. That sentence helped more than she knew. It stripped away Nolan's fog. This was not some mysterious banker trick. It was not a monster hiding in fine print. It was regular paperwork built on a bad foundation. If the lease was questionable, then everything standing on it leaned the wrong direction. I asked Bev, did Prairie State send this directly to the co-op? Yes, it references the LLC account and the crop proceeds assignment. And the co-op did not create that assignment. No, we received it as part of the account setup. We record settlement instructions. We do not certify family authority. That was fair. Hard, but fair. The co-op did not know what happened at my kitchen table because nothing had happened at my kitchen table. They had received paper entered paper and nearly paid according to paper. The danger was not that every person in the chain was crooked. The danger was that one false yes can travel a long way if nobody stops to ask the person being spoken for. Marcy sat down finally. Her purse slipped from her lap to the floor. Nolan, she said, what did you borrow against? He looked at the floor. I already knew part of the answer. His hauling business had been thin all summer. A repair bill here, a late customer there, fuel high enough to make any trucker swear. But thin is not the same as desperate. Desperate has a smell, and I could smell it now. I folded my copy of the lien notice and put it beside the scale ticket. Tell me what debt was worth putting my harvest behind your name, I said. Nolan did not answer, and that silence was the first honest thing he had brought into the room. I left the co-op with copies in a manila folder and the first load still on hold. Bev promised to call before anything changed. Marcy asked if she could ride with me back to the farm. I told her no, not cruelly, but plainly. I needed the quiet of my own cab before I could sit beside either one of my children. The field road home ran past the South 40, where the stalk still stood waiting for the combine. I drove slower than usual, not because I had nowhere to be, because every row I passed had become an argument. I had watched those rows come up in uneven green. I had walked them after hail. I had worried over them in August when the heat curled the leaves. Now a packet in a co-op office was trying to make those rows sound like somebody else's collateral. At home, I parked by the machine shed and went straight to the farm office. It was a small room off the back porch with 2 file cabinets, a scarred desk, and a calendar from the seed dealer that still showed September, because harvest had swallowed October. My wife used to run that room better than any accountant I ever paid. After she passed, I kept her labels: seed, fertilizer, fuel, repairs, co-op, FSA, taxes. I opened the top drawer and pulled the seed folder first. There was the corn order dated in February billed to Elias Rowan. There were the hybrid numbers, the acreage estimate, the early pay discount I had taken, because I hate paying more than I must. The receipt was stapled behind it, cleared through my farm checking account. Next came fertilizer, spring anhydrous, starter, side dress, lime from the year before on the north field. Some invoices were under my name. A few older recurring billing records still carried my wife's farm account, because changing a name in a rural billing system can take longer than fixing a planter. But every one of them tied back to our farm, our acres, our risk. No Rowan Family Acres LLC. No Nolan Rowan. No Marcy. I laid the invoices across the desk in rows. Seed on the left, fertilizer in the middle, chemical and fuel on the right. Then repair bills, planter monitor, tire bearing kit, combine service. The story they told was not emotional. It was better than emotional. It was dated, itemized, and paid. My phone buzzed again. Marcy, then a text. Dad, please call me. I did not know it was like this. I believed part of that. not all. Marcy had always been good at believing the gentlest version of a hard thing, especially when Nolan handed it to her. But not knowing enough is not the same as asking enough. That difference was going to cost us. I took a yellow pad and wrote a list. Scale ticket, co-op hold note, uploaded lease packet, lien notice, seed invoice, fertilizer invoice, fuel and repair receipts. Then I stopped with the pen in my hand. The records on my desk proved I carried the cost. They proved I bought the crop before the field ever made it. But there was another record one that did not care about family explanations or lender language. The farm office had the bills. The FSA office would have the operator record. If the government tract file showed me as the operator for that acreage and crop year, Nolan's lease story would have one more wall to climb. The next morning I drove to the local USDA service center with the manila folder on the passenger seat, and mud still dried along my boot soles. Harvest does not wait because your family has made a mess. The corn was still standing. The weather radio was already talking about a cold front. Every hour I spent chasing paper was an hour the field did not get picked. But if I kept hauling without knowing where the money would go, I would only be feeding the wrong account faster. The service center sat off the highway in a plain brick building with a flag out front and a bulletin board full of conservation notices inside. I had been there often enough to know which chair squeaked and which clerk kept peppermints in a glass jar. Mrs. Hanley looked up from her desk. "Morning, Elias. You need acreage reporting. Ew. Operator printout," I said, setting my cap on the counter. "For my corn acres, this crop year." Her expression changed just enough to tell me she heard the weight under the request. "For your records, for a dispute over who had authority to settle my crop." She did not ask for gossip. She asked for identification, pulled my farm number, and had me wait while she checked the tract file. That was the way it should be. No favors, no shortcuts, just the record. When she called me back, she slid a printout across the counter. My name sat on the operator line for the acreage in question. Elias Rowan. Crop year listed. Tract numbers listed. Corn acreage listed. The paper did not shout. It did not know Marcy's worry or Nolan's deadline or the wrong payee on the scale ticket. It simply contradicted the story that I had stepped aside and leased control of Harvest Settlement to a new LLC. "I need to be clear," Mrs. Hanley said. "This office cannot settle a family disagreement or decide payment instructions at your co-op." "I understand. What this shows is the operator of record we have for the acreage and crop year. That is what I came for." She made me a second copy and stamped the request receipt. I put both in the folder beside the seed invoice and the lien notice. The stack had started to feel less like paper and more like fence posts one after another, marking the line around what was mine to decide. As I turned to leave, Mrs. Hanley paused. "Elias, one more thing. There was an online access request tied to your farm records earlier this season. It did not change operator status, but it was linked to Marcy Rowan's login." I stopped with my hand on the door. "Marcy's. That is what the access note shows. I cannot tell you who was sitting at the keyboard, only what login was used." I thanked her and walked out into the cold sunshine with the folder under my arm. Marcy had told me Nolan said I signed the lease. Nolan had uploaded the packet. Now a records access note pointed through Marcy's login. The fake lease story had stopped being one child's bad idea. It had found a second door into my farm records. Marcy was waiting by the machine shed when I got home. She had parked where my wife used to park on Sundays, close to the lilac bush, far enough from the equipment that she would not be in the way. That small politeness made me sadder than if she had come in shouting. A person can still know where to park and forget where the boundary is. I carried the FSA printout into the farm office and set it on top of the invoices. Marcy followed me quiet for once. She looked at the rows of paper on my desk and seemed to see, maybe for the first time, that my life was not loose pages waiting for her and Nolan to organize. It was already organized. It had been organized by the woman who raised her and by the man standing in front of her. "The FSA record lists me as operator," I said. She nodded, eyes down. "I figured it would." "Then why did your login show up in a records access note?" Her face folded, not dramatically, just enough that the answer came before the words did. "Nolan asked me to pull some farm information," she said. "He said he needed acreage details for the LLC paperwork. And you gave him your login." I opened it for him. I was sitting there. That is not better, Marcy. She sat in the chair across from my desk, the same chair where she used to do spelling homework while I called the seed dealer. He told me you were slowing down. Not helpless. Not anything like that. Just tired. He said harvest settlement, insurance, lender, paperwork, everything was getting too scattered. He said if we put it under Rowan Family Acres for one season, it would simplify the books and protect the farm from late bills. Protect the farm from me? No. Her voice broke. From things falling through. I let that sit between us. Outside, the wind moved dry leaves along the porch step. I could hear the metal tick of the shed roof cooling. Did he tell you the crop proceeds would be assigned? She wiped under one eye. He said settlement would run through the LLC and then be reconciled. That is a polished way to say the check would not come to me. I thought it was temporary. Temporary is what people say when they do not want to use the word permission. She flinched, but she did not argue. I opened the folder and showed her the scale ticket, the lease page, the lien notice, the FSA printout. I did not shove them at her. I placed them down one at a time. Here is what I cannot understand, I said. If this was help, why did no one ask me? Marcy covered her mouth. Because Nolan said you would say no before you understood. Maybe I would have said no because I understood. That was the first moment she looked afraid of Nolan's version instead of mine. Dad, she whispered. He kept saying there was a deadline. I kept my hand on the FSA printout. What deadline? She shook her head. He would not tell me. He just said if the crop check did not move fast enough, everything would come apart. Nolan came back to the farm just before dusk when the yard lights were starting to hum, and the bins had turned dark against the sky. He did not pull up by the house. He stopped near the fuel barrels if this were a work call and not a reckoning. I watched him from the office window while Marcy sat behind me with the FSA printout in her lap. Neither of us spoke until his boots hit the porch. When he stepped inside, he looked first at the papers on my desk. You went to FSA, he said. I went where the record was. He nodded once, sharp and unhappy. Then you know enough to make this worse. No, I said. I know enough to stop pretending this was bookkeeping. Marcy stood. Tell him about the deadline. Nolan shot her a look that still had older brother command in it, even though she was grown, and I was done obeying anyone's silence. Tell me, I said. He rubbed both hands over his face. For the first time that week, he looked less slick than tired. The trucking company got squeezed. 2 customers paid late. 1 truck went down. Insurance renewed higher than I expected. Fuel ate everything else. I had a short-term advance lined up through Prairie State, but they wanted crop proceeds language as backup. Your crop proceeds? He did not answer. Say it clean, Nolan. The LLC was supposed to receive settlement, he said. The advance would carry me through harvest. After the checks came in, I was going to pay it back and move the rest where it belonged. Marcy whispered, You told me it was for farm bills. It was connected to the farm. No, I said. It was connected to my corn. He turned on me, then not shouting, but close. You think I wanted to do it this way. You think I enjoyed asking my sister to help set up paperwork. I was trying to keep my business alive. If it failed, people would say I could not run anything. They would say I was living off the Rowan name. So you used the Rowan name. That stopped him. The room felt smaller than it had that morning. On my desk sat the path and order scale ticket hold, note lease packet, line notice invoices, FSA printout. Nolan had called it help, Marcy had called it temporary, and the lender had called it collateral. But under all those words was one plain thing. My son had tried to turn my harvest into breathing room for his own trouble. I thought about all the times he had come to me with a smaller need, a tire, a payroll gap, a customer slow to pay. I had helped when I could. I had refused when I had to. This time he had skipped the asking because he could not bear the answer. The co-op hold is going to raise questions, I said. Nolan looked toward the window. Prairie State will call. Then you better be ready to tell them the truth. Dad, if they pull that advance now, I'm finished. I looked at the papers, then at my son. If they keep it on a false assignment, I am the one paying for the lie. Outside, a gust rattled dry corn leaves in the dark field. Harvest was waiting. So was the lender. Bev called before breakfast the next morning. I had been awake since 4, not sleeping so much as lying still, while the house made its old noises around me. The combine needed fuel. The South 40 needed cutting. Nolan's words kept circling the ceiling. The advance would carry me through harvest. He had said it like the harvest was a pocket he could reach into and pay back before I noticed. Elias Bev said, "I have the delivery ledger and the account set up, timestamps ready for you to review. I cannot release funds yet, but I can document the hold more fully. I will be there in 20 minutes. Marcy was at the kitchen table when I came downstairs. She looked like she had not slept either. Nolan was not there. "Where is your brother?" He said he had calls to make. That answer sat wrong, but I did not chase it yet. I took the folder and drove to the co-op. Bev had a fresh packet waiting. This one was not the lease itself. It was the co-op's own trail, when the LLC account was created, when the settlement instructions were entered, when the lease packet was uploaded, when Prairie State sent the notice, and when my first load hit the scale. Dates can be quieter than accusations and twice as sharp. The LLC account had been created shortly before harvest. Not months ago as part of thoughtful planning. Not after a family meeting. Close enough to the first loads that it looked less like modernization and more like a door opened just in time for money to walk through. "Show me the assignment language," I said. Bev turned a page. "This is the part that concerned me after your dispute. The wording did not name just one delivery. It did not say one field, one load, one check, or one bill. It was broad enough to catch harvest proceeds tied to the account until the assignment was released or corrected." "All of it," I said. "Potentially," Bev answered. "That is why the hold note is specific. It says the first delivery is frozen pending account authority review and that Elias Rowan disputes the lease settlement pay and proceeds assignment. Will Prairie State see that? If they ask about settlement, yes. I can also send a standard notice that funds are on hold because the operator of record disputes the account authority." I looked through the glass toward the pit. Trucks were already lining up. Every farmer in that lane had his own bills, his own weather, his own reasons not to wait. I hated that my family's mess had reached Bev's counter. "I am not asking you to solve my family," I said. "Good," she said, "because I cannot. But I need the co-op record clean." "That I can do." She stamped the hold documentation and made me copies. The packet was thicker, now ticket hold note ledger timestamps, lease dispute, lender notice invoices, FSA printout. The story had stopped depending on my hurt and started depending on sequence. My phone buzzed while Bev clipped the pages together. The caller was not Marcy or Nolan. It was a neighboring elevator, 12 miles east. I answered. "Mr. Rowan," the scale manager said. "Sorry to bother you. We just had a call asking whether corn from your tract could be settled to Rowan Family Acres LLC over here." I closed my eyes. Nolan was not done trying to outrun the hold. The neighboring elevator manager's name was Clay Mercer, and I had sold him beans twice when the basis was better on his side of the county. "Clay," I said, keeping my voice even, "who called you?" He hesitated. "Nolan Rowan. He said he was helping coordinate harvest settlement and wanted to know what we would need to pay Rowan Family Acres LLC if a load from your tract came across our scale." There it was. Not a mistake in one co-op system. Not a misunderstanding trapped inside Bev's paperwork. A second door. Did he bring corn? No, just called. "Do not accept settlement instructions under that LLC without speaking to me directly." "That is why I called," Clay said. "It did not sound like your usual setup." I thanked him, hung up, and stood there in Bev's office with the phone still in my hand. Anger came, but it came clean. Not the hot kind that makes a man slam doors and say things he cannot repair. The useful kind. The kind that tells you to gather what you have before someone tries to scatter it. Bev watched me across the desk. "Was that about Nolan?" He called another elevator asking if my corn could settle to the LLC there. She took that in without drama. "Then you need to notify any buyer you might use." "I will. Use copies. Keep the originals. Give them enough to flag the account, not enough to let rumors carry your business." That was good advice. I made 3 copy sets at the co-op scale ticket hold note, FSA operator printout, and my own written statement that I had not authorized Rowan Family Acres LLC to receive settlement on my crop. I did not include every family detail. Clay did not need to know Nolan's debt. Other elevators did not need Marcy's mistake. They needed the boundary. By noon I had driven to Clay's office, then called the smaller grain buyer north of town. I spoke plainly each time. If corn from my tract comes in settlement, goes under Elias Rowan, unless I personally sign new instructions. Nobody argued. Grain people understand clean instructions. They also understand that harvest pressure makes people try things. When I got back to the farm, Nolan's pickup was by the machine shed again. Marcy's car sat near the lilac bush. I parked between them and carried the folder under my arm. The equipment shed smelled of diesel dust and old corn leaves. My combine sat inside with the side panel open, waiting for the fuel filter I had meant to change before all this started. It was the right place for the conversation better than the kitchen. No soft chairs, no family photographs, just machines that only worked when every part did what it was supposed to do. Nolan stood by the workbench. Marcy sat on a 5-gallon bucket, eyes red. Neither one spoke when I entered. I set the folder on the bench. I heard about the call to Clay Mercer, I said. Nolan's face hardened. This is where we stop chasing side doors, I said. We are going to talk in front of the tools, the invoices, and the records. Marcy looked at Nolan, then back at me. The family meeting had begun, and this time the paper was in the room before the excuses. Nolan picked up the FSA printout first, then put it down like it had dirt on it. This is exactly what I mean, he said. You drag every little thing through 3 offices and a stack of paper. That is not how farms run now. I stood across the workbench from him. The folder lay open between us. Marcy sat near the air compressor with her hands locked around each other. Farms still run on records, I said. They run on speed, relationships, financing. You cannot keep acting like every handshake and every form has to pass through your desk before anyone moves. When the form moves my crop check, yes, it passes through my desk. He pointed toward the combine. You think because you can still run that machine, every decision has to stay frozen in your way of doing things. There it was, not said as gently as Marcy had said it, not wrapped in worry. Nolan wanted the argument to become about whether I was stubborn, outdated, too set in my habits to understand modern farm business. If I followed him there, we would spend the afternoon debating my pride instead of his paperwork. So I did not follow. I took out the first page. Who named Rowan Family Acres LLC as settlement payee? He looked away. I set down the next page. Who uploaded the crop share lease from your email? You know I did. Who copied my signature onto language I never saw? His jaw tightened. Marcy made a small sound, but did not defend him. I placed the lien notice beside the lease. Who assigned crop proceeds broadly enough that Prairie State believed my harvest could support your advance? You keep saying your harvest like I am a stranger. You are not a stranger. That is why this hurts. But being my son does not make my yes automatic. He leaned on the workbench, both palms flat. I was trying to save my company. Then the honest sentence was, Dad, I am in trouble. Will you help me? You would have said no. Maybe. Or maybe I would have asked for real numbers. Maybe I would have helped with one bill and refused another. Maybe I would have told you to park a truck for a month. You did not want my answer. You wanted my crop. Marcy stood then. Her voice shook, but it held. Nolan, you told me Dad agreed. I told you he understood the plan. No, she said. You told me he signed. The shed went quiet, except for the tick of the cooling engine. That was the moment Marcy stopped standing between us. Not because she had suddenly become innocent. She had opened the login. She had believed what suited her. But she stopped carrying Nolan's version for him. I gathered the documents into a neat stack. This ends at a table with everyone who has a records ying, I said. Bev Prairie State's records person, you, Marcy, and me. Nolan gave a bitter laugh. A meeting? A records meeting, I said. Not a family shouting match. We will put the ticket upload assignment, lien, notice invoices, and FSA printout in order. Then we will see which story survives. Marcy nodded through tears. Nolan looked toward the open shed door where the cornfield waited in the gray afternoon. He had tried speed. Now the records were going to catch him. The records meeting happened at the co-op the next morning in Bev Carver's back room, the one with the long folding table and a coffee pot that had seen better decades. Bev sat at one end with a yellow pad. I sat on her left with my folder. Marcy sat beside me, not close enough to lean on, but close enough that I could hear her breathing. Nolan chose the chair across from us. At the other end sat a woman from Prairie State Ag Credit named Dana Wills, Records Department, gray jacket, reading glasses, no wasted motion. She started before Nolan could. "I am here to review documents, not family history," Dana said. "If the co-op has a disputed settlement account, we need to know what record supports what instruction." "That is why we are here," Bev said. I appreciated both women right then. Not because they were on my side. Because they were on the side of sequence. Bev placed the first page in the middle of the table. Scale ticket," she said. "First delivery from Elias Rowan's corn load. Payee printed as Rowan Family Acres LLC." I looked at Nolan. He looked at the wall. "Second page. Account setup summary," Bev said. "LLC settlement account created shortly before harvest. Crop share lease packet uploaded to support settlement authority." Dana made a note. "Upload source. Email contact listed as Nolan Rowan." Nolan shifted in his chair. "I already said I helped with the setup." "We will get to explanations after the record is laid out," Dana said. Third page. The lease. Bev slid it forward. "This is the uploaded crop share lease. Elias disputes seeing or approving the language. He also states the signature image appears copied from an older farm program document." Dana took the page and compared it to the copy I had brought from my file, the one with the skipped ink line through the G. She did not raise an eyebrow. People who handle records for a living learn not to give away conclusions with their faces. Fourth page. The assignment. "This directs crop proceeds through the LLC account," Bev said. "The wording is broad." "Broad how?" Marcy asked. Dana answered this time. "It does not limit itself to one check or one invoice. It appears to cover settlement proceeds tied to the account unless corrected or released." Marcy closed her eyes. Fifth page. Prairie State's notice. Dana touched the header. "This notice was sent after our file reflected the LLC account and proceeds assignment. 6th and 7th came from me, seed, and fertilizer invoices. Fuel repairs the cost side of the crop." I set them down slowly. "Paid by me," I said, "or through my late wife's old farm account that I still maintain for recurring billing records. Last came the FSA operator printout." Dana read it longer than the others. "Operator of record for the acreage and crop year is Elias Rowan," she said. There was no thunderclap, no dramatic confession, just a table full of paper that had stopped lining up around Nolan's story. I watched Dana place the FSA printout beside the lease. The forged lease could still sit on the table. It just could not survive the sequence. Dana Wills took off her reading glasses and folded them on top of the file. "Here is the issue," she said. "Prairie State can record a crop proceeds assignment when the supporting account paperwork appears complete. But if the operator of record disputes authority, and the person who carried the input liability also disputes the settlement, instruction proceeds cannot simply keep flowing to the LLC as if nothing is wrong." Nolan leaned forward. It was a paperwork misunderstanding. Nobody answered him right away. That silence was different from the silences at home. This one did not protect feelings. It left the sentence exposed. Bev tapped the scale ticket. The first live delivery triggered the conflict. Dana tapped the lease. "This document supports the assignment." I tapped the FSA printout. "This document says I am the operator." Then I tapped the invoices. "And these say I carried the cost." Nolan's face tightened. "You are making it sound like I stole something before anything even paid. I am saying you built instructions that would have paid wrong if Bev had not held the load. I was going to fix it after harvest." "After which harvest?" I asked. "The first check. The last check. After your advance was safe. After Marcy quit asking questions." Marcy looked down at her hands. Dana turned a page in her file. "Mr. Rowan, the concern for Prairie State is not intent. It is whether our notice relied on an assignment that is now disputed by the listed operator and input payer. Until corrected, the lender cannot treat the co-op's hold as a routine delay." Nolan swallowed. "So what happens?" "We request corrected documentation," Dana said. "We confirm who has authority to direct proceeds. We suspend reliance on the disputed assignment for these deliveries unless the parties produce clear authorization." That word clear landed like rain on dust. Nolan heard something else. "If you suspend it, the advance gets called." Dana did not promise or threaten. "That depends on the terms of your file and what substitute support exists." I turned toward my son. Now we are finally at the real sentence. He stared at me. The whole time you talked about clean books and harvest help. But this assignment did not cover a small bill. It did not cover one repair. It covered crop proceeds broadly enough for a lender to lean on them. Because they needed enough security, he said. For whose debt? He did not answer. I kept my voice low. Why did the assignment cover all crop proceeds? Nolan rubbed the back of his neck. Because partial would not get me there. Get you where? His mouth opened. For a second, I saw the boy who once broke my shop window and stood in the gravel trying to decide whether another lie might save him. Then the grown man came back, and with him came the exhaustion he had been hiding under speed. I was drowning, he said. Marcy lifted her head. Nolan looked at Dana, then Bev, then me. The truck note, penalties, insurance, fuel cards. I kept thinking one more load, one more customer payment, one more week. Then the advance was the only thing left. I felt no victory, only the cold shape of the truth. He had not needed a farm structure. He had needed rescue and dressed it up as paperwork. After Nolan said he was drowning, Marcy cried without making a sound. She had been holding herself together with the same story he had handed her. The LLC was protective. The books would be cleaner. Harvest settlement would be simpler. Dad would understand once everything balanced out. Now that story lay on the table beside the scale ticket and the FSA printout, too thin to cover what had happened. Dana asked the next question because she had to. Marcy, did you witness Elias Rowan sign the crop share lease in this packet? Oh, Marcy pressed both hands to her cheeks. No. Nolan turned toward her. Marcy. She shook her head. No, Nolan, I did not. Dana's pen moved. Did Elias tell you directly that he approved Rowan Family Acres LLC receiving settlement proceeds from his crop? Marcy looked at me then, not asking me to save her, not asking me to soften the question, just finally looking at the person whose yes had been borrowed without being given. No, she said. He did not tell me that. Nolan pushed back from the table. Bev's eyes went to him and he stopped before he stood all the way. Marcy took a breath that sounded painful. I ignored warnings because I wanted the version where this helped Dad. Nolan said the LLC sounded cleaner, protective. He said lenders and co-ops liked structure. He said Dad was proud and would fight the plan before he saw it working. I let that be enough because it made me feel useful. The room stayed still. I opened my records login, she said. I helped pull acreage details. I did not watch Dad sign that lease. I did not hear him approve the crop proceeds assignment. I should have asked him. That last sentence was the first clean plank laid across the mess. Dana slid a blank statement form toward her. Write that in your own words. Keep it factual. Marcy picked up the pen. Her hand shook so hard the first line came out crooked. She wrote slowly. I did not read over her shoulder. Honesty watched too closely can turn into performance. I let her have the page, the shame, and the chance to choose the truth without me dragging it out of her. Nolan stared at the table. When Marcy finished, she signed and dated the statement. Dana read it, then placed it with the packet. This helps clarify witness authority, Dana said. It does not by itself resolve every issue, but it matters. Marcy whispered, Dad, I am sorry. I wanted the apology to fix more than it could. I wanted to reach back before the login, before the lease packet, before the first wrong payee printed in that scale house. But fathers do not get that kind of clock. I am not asking you to be perfect, I said. I am asking you to be honest before the paper moves money. She nodded through tears. Then I looked at Nolan. Your sister just chose correction, I said. Now you choose. His face had gone pale. Either you help unwind this cleanly, or you keep asking bad paper to carry you deeper. Dana closed her file halfway waiting. Bev waited too. Marcy held a tissue in both hands. For the first time, Nolan had no fast answer ready. Nolan finally chose the smaller truth before the bigger consequences chose for him. He did not make a speech. He did not apologize in a way that fixed the room. He looked at Dana Wills and said, the assignment should not move forward under that file. Dana waited a beat. Say it plainly. His throat worked. Prairie State should not rely on the LLC proceeds assignment for Dad's corn unless Dad gives corrected authorization. There it was, not enough, late. painful but usable. Bev wrote it down word for word. Dana opened her file again and made 3 notes, each one slow enough that Nolan had to sit with what he had said. The co-op hold remains in place, Bev said. No settlement funds tied to Elias Rowan's disputed delivery will be released to Rowan Family Acres LLC. Dana nodded. Prairie State will reverse reliance on the proceeds assignment pending corrected documents. I will mark our file that operator status input, liability, and settlement authority are disputed, and that Nolan Rowan has acknowledged the assignment should not control these proceeds without Elias Rowan's authorization. Marcy shut her eyes. Nolan stared at the table. I listened carefully, because this was where fancy words could either protect me or confuse me. Reverse reliance, I said. That means the lender stops treating my crop check as support for Nolan's advance. Pending corrected documentation, yes, Dana said. It does not erase his debt. It does not decide every obligation in his file. It means Prairie State cannot treat your disputed harvest proceeds as if the assignment is clean. That distinction mattered. I did not want magic. I wanted the path honest. Nolan's bill did not vanish because my crop stepped out from under it. The co-op did not hand me a check that minute. But the money had stopped sliding downhill toward the wrong account. Bev added a second note to the co-op file. I will document that the hold was placed before settlement, that the first delivery is frozen for corrected settlement instructions, and that future deliveries from Elias Rowan's tract require direct authorization from Elias. Thank you, I said. She looked at me over her glasses. This is why we hold when something smells wrong. Nolan gave a bitter little laugh. So I am just cut loose. I turned to him. No, you are separated from my crop. That is not the same thing. He flinched because he heard the difference. Dana closed the file. Nolan Prairie State will contact you about the advance. Be prepared with real numbers and a corrected repayment proposal. The word real hung over him. Real debt. Real payment. Real damage. No more hiding behind my scale ticket. When we walked out of Bev's back room, the co-op was still running. Trucks rolled in. Tickets printed. Men drank coffee and complained about moisture. Life had not stopped for my family trouble, in a strange way that steadied me. My crop money had not been saved by shouting. It had been contained by record sequence and one manager willing to press hold before the check moved. But Nolan's debt was still standing outside the door, waiting for him like weather. Nolan followed me to the farm after the meeting, but he did not drive fast this time. I watched his pickup in my mirror, staying 2 car lengths back on the county road. Marcy drove behind him. 3 vehicles, 1 family, no one ready to ride together. At the farm, I did not go inside. I walked to the machine shed and opened the big door. The combine waited where I had left it. Side panel still up, fuel filter still unchanged. Work has a mercy to it. It does not ask whether your heart is clean before it needs doing. Nolan stood near the doorway. Prairie State is going to want numbers by Friday. Then give them numbers. He took a folded sheet from his jacket. Not co-op paper. Not LLC paper. His paper. A list written in his own hand. Truck note past due. 2 late penalties. Fuel card maxed. Insurance renewal split into payments. Repair on Unit 3. Payroll taxes I should have set aside. He read each line like it cost him to let it be heard. I did not interrupt. There is a difference between confession and accounting. A confession can make a man feel lighter without changing anything. Accounting shows where the weight actually sits. When he finished, he looked at me. I was trying to buy time. With my harvest. Yes, the word was small, but it did not dodge. Marcy stood by the workbench with her arms folded around herself. I could feel her wanting to step in to soften it, to make us all less exposed. This time, she stayed quiet. I took Nolan's list and read it from top to bottom. The amount was ugly, but not beyond daylight. Ugly can be worked with. Hidden ugly grows teeth. Here is what I will do, I said. After harvest, when my crop is settled correctly and my input bills are paid, I will sit down with you and look at a real restructuring plan. Nolan's eyes lifted. That does not mean I pay it. His eyes dropped again. It means I will help you face it in the open. We can call Prairie State. We can talk about selling 1 truck, stretching terms, cutting loads that lose money, whatever the numbers say. But my crop will not be secret collateral. Not today. Not because you are scared, Not because you are my son." He pressed his lips together. "I thought if I asked you would see me as a failure. I see you as a man who lied because failure scared him. That hurt him. It was meant to. Not to punish. To name the thing." Marcy wiped her face. "I helped because I wanted to feel like I was protecting both of you." I turned to her. "Then your work starts with saying exactly what you helped do." She nodded, but I could see the shame gather again. Nolan's debt had come into the light. Marcy's role was still only half uncovered. Before harvest could finish, both of my children had to stop calling avoidance love. That evening, I asked Marcy and Nolan to come into the kitchen. Not the farm office, not the machine shed, the kitchen. The room where their mother had packed school lunches, where bills had been sorted beside cooling pies, where hard weather and thin years had been discussed without anyone pretending the table belonged to only one person. I set no forms in front of them to approve. I asked for no fresh signatures. I did not offer a bargain, and I did not ask them to perform sorrow for me. I laid copies of the documents in a row down the center of the table. Scale ticket, co-op hold note, LLC account setup, lease packet, proceeds assignment, prairie state notice, seed invoice, fertilizer invoice, fuel and repair bills, FSA operator printout. Marcy sat on my left. Nolan sat on my right. I remained standing for a minute because sitting felt too gentle. "You both tried to route around a conversation," I said. "Tonight you will read what you used instead." Nolan looked exhausted. "Dad, we already went through it." "No, other people summarized it. Now you read it." Marcy reached for the scale ticket first. Her voice trembled when she read the wrong payee line. Nolan read the hold note next, stumbling over the words that said, "I disputed the settlement account." Then Marcy read the account setup date close enough to harvest that even she winced. When Nolan reached the lease packet, he stopped at my signature. "Keep going," I said. He read the settlement language. His voice got quieter with every line. "It is one thing to defend a plan in your own words. It is another thing to hear your mouth carry the words that would have moved someone else's money." Marcy read the proceeds assignment and covered her eyes halfway through. "All crop proceeds tied to the account," she whispered. I did not understand how broad that was. "You did not ask until after it printed on my ticket." She nodded. "I know." Nolan read the prairie state notice. He did not look up when he finished. Then I gave them the invoices. Seed, fertilizer, fuel, repairs. Each dated before harvest. Each tied to the cost of making the crop exist before anyone could argue about where the check belonged. "This is what you tried to borrow against," I said. "Not extra money, not a family cushion, a year of risk." Last Marcy read the FSA printout. My name on the operator line, my acreage, my crop year. She set it down with both hands. The kitchen went quiet. No one shouted. No one slammed a chair back. Consequence does not always need noise. Sometimes it is three people sitting under the same light, finally unable to pretend paper is harmless. The phone rang just as I gathered the copies. Bev's name showed on the screen. I answered, and her first words were, "Elias, the corrected settlement instruction is ready for the first check." The corrected settlement printed at the co-op the next morning. I stood on my side of the scale house counter while Tyler tore the ticket clean and handed it over with both hands, as if even he understood paper could feel heavier after what it had nearly done. The gross weight, tear weight, moisture, and dockage were ordinary. The line that mattered was not. Payee Elias Rowan. I read it twice. Bev stood behind Tyler with her arms folded. "The hold stays documented. The corrected settlement instruction applies to this delivery and any additional loads you bring in under your operator record. And Rowan Family Acres LLC flagged. No proceeds from your tracked route there without direct written authorization from you." Nolan was beside the coffee machine, hat in both hands. Marcy stood near the door. Neither one said anything when I folded the corrected ticket and put it in the same shirt pocket where the wrong one had sat like a coal. The check did not make me rich. Farmers know better than that. A crop check can look large to people who did not pay to grow it. To me, it already had names attached before the ink dried. Seed first, fertilizer second, fuel account, repair bill, drying charges, then the tax money set aside, where I would not be tempted to borrow from it and call that borrowing hope. I sat in Bev's office and wrote the payment list on my yellow pad. Nolan watched from the doorway. He had seen crop money before, But maybe never like this. Not as a number to catch him, not as family overflow, as a year of cost walking backward through the bills that made it possible. I did not think about all that, he said. That was the problem. He swallowed. I saw the check coming and thought it could save everything. It was already spoken for, I said. Buy seed in February, fertilizer in April, fuel in October, repairs every time something broke, and the taxman whether I liked him or not. Bev left us alone for a minute. Outside the office window, a truck eased onto the scale. The printer clicked. Another farmer's day moved forward the way mine should have. Nolan looked older than he had a week ago. I did not enjoy that. I had wanted him to grow up under lighter lessons than this one. But a father cannot protect a son from the cost of a shortcut without teaching him the shortcut worked. Marcy stepped closer. Dad, what happens now? I put the corrected ticket beside the payment list. Now I keep harvesting. I pay what the crop owes. I keep the farm operating. And neither of you touches settlement instructions, farm records, or lender paperwork tied to my crop without me sitting at the table. Nolan nodded once. Say it, I told him. His voice was low. I do not touch it without you. I looked at Marcy. I do not either, she said. That was not forgiveness. Not yet. It was the first fence post of the boundary they had forced me to build. I picked up the corrected check. My name was on it. But what Nolan saw at last was not just a name. It was the labor behind it. By sundown, I had the combine back in the South 40. The rows came in steady dry leaves snapping against the header grain rolling into the tank, with the sound that had kept me farming through years, when sense might have told another man to quit. I drove slower than I needed to, not because I was afraid of the machine, because every pass gave me time to think about the line between helping family and letting family use love as a gate latch. Marcy came out before dark with coffee in a thermos. She did not climb into the cab. She waited by the pickup until I stopped at the end rows. I called the FSA office, she said when I stepped down. I asked them to remove any access I should not have. I told them I do not want farm records opened through my login again unless you are there. Good, she nodded, accepting the smallness of the word. We were not back to easy. Maybe we would never be easy in the same way. But she had turned toward repair instead of explanation, and that mattered. Can I still come by? She asked. Yes, I said, but not to manage me around my back. Her eyes filled, but she held herself steady. I understand. Nolan came later after the grain cart was parked and the sky had gone purple over the bins. He brought no papers, no pitch, no fast sentence. Just a notebook with his own numbers written in it. Prairie State wants a repayment proposal, he said. I am selling Unit 3. That truck had been his pride. I knew what it cost him to say it. That is a start. I also called Clay Mercer and told him not to accept anything from me on your crop. That should have been my call to make. I know. We stood by the field edge while the last light went out of the stalks. I could have cut him down with words. Part of me wanted to. But destruction is easy when a man has already shown you where he is weak. I did not want Nolan destroyed. I wanted him honest enough to rebuild on ground that was actually his. After harvest, I said, we will look at your numbers. I may help you think through them. I may make calls with you. But I will not hide your debt under my crop, and I will not let you make Marcy your witness for a story that is not true. He stared toward the field. I am sorry, Dad. Then repair what you can. Repay what you owe. And ask before you reach. He nodded. I looked across the rows, the same land my wife had loved, the same ground my children had played in before money taught them fear. The farm was still mine to work. My relationship with Marcy was open, but changed. Nolan was still my son, but son did not mean free passage through another man's labor. Family can ask for help. Family should ask. I have never believed love means leaving people to drown in silence. But love does not give anyone the right to reroute another person's work without consent. That was the line around the field. The lesson from a land story is that memory is not the same thing as ownership, and family history is not a substitute for consent. Real property disputes often turn ugly when people treat a parent, a farm, or an old house as something already divided in their minds. That is why records matter. Deeds maps, liens, restrictions, and signed documents are not cold things. when they protect a lifetime of work. They are the fence around the truth. If your family ever pressures you to sign quickly because everyone supposedly knows what is fair, slow down. Fairness that cannot survive a quiet records check was probably never fairness. It was just pressure wearing family clothes. This story was dramatized and edited from real public dispute patterns and official source research. Details were changed and combined for privacy and storytelling. This is not legal, medical, financial, or professional advice.